Yeah, thank you very much. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexey. I'm developer at EPAM. Recently, I transitioned to lead software engineer role. I've been working in EPAM for more than 4 years. In IT, I think it's more like about 10 years. And I'm passionate about cloud, .NET, maybe AI. And as everyone, I'm trying to learn new stuff and try out new things. One of which is Aspire. And today I'm going to show you my lessons learned from Aspire. Let me focus. So what are we going to do and what is my focus for today's talk? I want to, first of all, make it practical and make it interactive and leave some time for Q&A sessions because I think the structure of this presentation is very, light and I didn't put a lot of details into presentation. So guys, you have an opportunity to ask questions that specifically interesting to you. So please feel free to join Q&A session and ask questions. But the structure of this agenda is like we will do a short Minty poll to know each other, the audience. Then I will give you a really brief introduction to Aspire to set a base ground for our talk. And then I will give you actually practical lessons that I've learned. And then the Q&A session. Let's try to stick into 1 hour, which can be hard. Okay, without further ado, guys, could you please join Mintymeter.com? And you can do it by either entering the code on Minty website or using a link from the chat. So please do it in most suitable way for you. Okay. And the first question, I would like to know who is already using Aspire and in which way. Are you using it in production? Are you using it for your personal project? Let's see how it works for you. Oh wow, it's good that I prepared the introduction because it looks like you don't know anything about it and about Aspire.
Alexey, are you the only who voted for the first option?
No, it's another stranger, it's some other stranger. We probably need to give him a mic or something, probably I know this guy. Maybe
guy
I know
from
him.
your project, right?
Okay. Yeah, maybe it is. Okay, since we don't have a lot of time, I don't know how Minty works. I don't know if you will have a possibility to vote separately, but I plan to move on. It looks like we have a very beginner stage of adopting Aspire in EPAM. Not so many people using it. It's very interesting. Okay, I will move to the next question. When you hear Aspire, what comes to your mind? Put a word, and we will see some word cloud and see what people think about Aspire. But since most of you don't know about Aspire, probably it will be not so productive. What this abbreviation stands for? Anybody knows? Infrastructure as a code. Also, I didn't include profanity filter, so it's interesting. Aspire, microservices, orchestration, Terraform, test containers, interesting. Cloud. So far, framework and orchestration is winning. I'm wondering how many responses. Okay, nice. I think most of the answers you got it right, guys, and I hope by the end of my talk we will have some sort of consensus or at least a better understanding. So thank you for your questions, by the way. I think it's really valuable and give me understanding of what's happening. How do I present? Then we can move to next section, which is introduction. So no, wait. Sorry, guys. Probably I need to restart my presentation. For some reason, it shows me the wrong slide. Chicks. It does auto change. Anyhow, you've seen a previous picture. Let me try it one more time. Okay, I will not fight. I will not fight with the presentation. I will open it like this and then continue. Probably in .NET, you've seen a lot of stuff that you can build. .NET is a cross-platform um, cross-platform tool framework that allows you to build various application workflows. And recently, the cloud, AI, and microservices distributed architecture is getting the friction, and it's becoming more popular. And all of these kind of scenarios can be supported by Aspire. But in this talk, I will focus on most typical one, which you probably already seen. It's like probably your application looks like something like this. It's a typical distributed system with various components, including front end, back end, maybe some observability and event bus. So it's a typical architecture. So as you can see, it has many dependencies. Here we have Postgres, Redis, event bus as a RabbitMQ. And in order to do a full development cycle, probably you need to somehow have these dependencies installed. And yes, of course, modern apps very frequently require observability, resiliency, scalability, and all of this good stuff is de facto standard for modern cloud native applications. And we have Aspire, a tool that comes to rescue you. Of course, we have Docker Compose, but in this talk, I will try to show you that Aspire is something different, something bigger, and it gives you lots more than just Docker Compose. So Aspire specifically has 6 different features or building blocks that you can use. First of all is smart defaults. Smart defaults is basically opinionated way to build a cloud system or microservices system. It includes something like observability, resiliency, and health checks. I will not delve you into details, but right now into details, but you just need to know that Aspire gives you something called service defaults, and it allows you to manage cross-cutting concerns. And it's like a standard way for your application, so it's easier to maintain. Next one is developer dashboard, and people love it. I think it's a killer feature of Aspire. And basically, instead of looking at Docker Compose output logs, you have an integrated environment with links to your system, with a possibility to drill down into traces, for example, and see how much it takes to, for example, submit a record to a database and so on. So you have a very nice tool for your local development to adopt the latest and greatest, practices of building. And also the developer dashboard is built with Blazor. It's built on .NET stack, and it can be run in standalone mode, so you don't really need to use Aspire to adopt Aspire dashboard. Actually, it accepts a standard OpenTelemetry endpoint, and you can configure it to use it, for example, in your local development scenario. I highly recommend you to checking out the Aspire dashboard. The third thing is orchestration. As I said, it's a replacement for Docker Compose, but instead of YAML, we have a C#. Basically, we have a structure here of web frontend that depends on API service. And right now, I'm not showing you the dependency between these services, but the general structure is that we can define our dependency graph or just our system in C#. And this is very powerful mental model because we can describe, we have a C# here, so it's a programmable way of describing stuff. You can write your own code to support your infrastructure. And basically, it integrates with Aspire dashboard, so you don't need to do anything. Your app host which is like the entry point for describing your system, consists of the projects that are source generated. You just use IntelliSense to pick the project from auto-generated code based on the dependency of app host, and then you add to the builder the dependency, and then it appears on the dashboard. The next one, which is service discovery. As you know, in microservices, we need to somehow pinpoint the service we are going to talk to, and it's getting complicated in case of horizontal scaling and so on. So as Docker Compose or Kubernetes solves this problem, so does Aspire, right? Basically here we are, as you can see, API service, like front end referencing API service. And then since it's a specific kind of resource, which is project resource, we can resolve the DNS service of this microservice or dependency by its name. So it's very convenient, and it's stuff that you usually expect from Docker Compose or another tools like Console or anything. The next one is integrations. Basically, integrations is the way it's a building blocks or Lego pieces for your Aspire. We have various built-in integrations that are maintained by Aspire team. And we also have a community one, and it's quite easy to write your own integration. And I want to describe briefly what is integration. Basically, when you're adding, for example, let's say Postgres, you want to do a couple of stuff. You want to add it to DI, so it's possible to resolve some sort of connection client to the database, or even entity framework context based on connection string, right? And add it to DI. Then you probably want to somehow monitor the health of dependency and its availability. So it's a health check component. Another one, it's maybe you want to trace how much time it takes for DB to perform calls to database or see the SQL commands that are executed. It's also a telemetry aspect, right? And another one is a configuration, how to configure everything so it works and you don't need to worry about it. So, and maybe resiliency, right? As you can see, integration is something more than just adding stuff to DI. It adds automatically cross-cutting concerns. And since Aspire is some sort of framework, right? It has an opinionated way of doing so. So you just follow this strategy by adding integration, and it just works. And also there is 2 points of integrations. First one is it's called what's name? It's called client integration and hosting integration. Client integration allows you to add the stuff on the consuming side, and hosting application and hosting integration allows you to add backing services or dependencies. For example, if you want to spin up a Postgres server as a container, you use a hosting integration. But if you want to consume it from some service, you use a client integration. So be careful with this too, because it can be sometimes misleading. And the final part, Aspire can do a deployment to you based on some conventions. By default, it deploys to app containers, and it does a lot of magic. And there is something called Aspire Manifest, and basically it's a contract that can be used by other tools to deploy to the cloud. So, for example, AZD tool, maybe you have used it or seen it. It uses the Aspire Manifest to deploy your infrastructure based on one command. You just type AZD up, and your infrastructure is deployed to the cloud, including the provisioning of Azure resources. For example, you can specify some scenario like in local development scenario, I want to use Postgres container, which is fine. But when I deploy and use AZD app, I want to use an analog from Azure. So basically, you can impact how manifest is generated and specify it. From my experience, I haven't used the deployment scenario in production. I think it's risky. I think it's a little bit right now premature, and it's not ready for production use. I also know that people most of the time dissatisfied with the deployment functionality because it's not flexible enough, but things are getting better. Okay, to sum up, we have aspired to solve a lot of problems for us, and it's more than Docker Compose. It's a programmable way of managing your application and orchestrating it during the development workflow, or even if you're brave enough in production. So right now it's the second part. I hope the first part was informative. Let's focus on actual talk, right? Because the interesting and juicy part.
Yeah, let's learn some lessons, right?
Yeah, it's time to do so, because on the marketing team of Aspire did a good job. It's like very popular, but in reality, not everything works as you would expect. So before we go further, let's see what we dealt with. Or I'm working right now on pre-sales portal, and basically it's an enterprise search solution that allows you to search your enterprise data, such as SharePoint sites, maybe other data sources from EPAM, and have some insights, and find use a fuzzy search and search in various scenarios. Anyhow, we already have as you can see, we have a distributed system consists of actual web search and workers that we maybe workers that we tend to scale horizontally over time. Also we have dependencies like Elasticsearch to store index for search, blob storage to store assets, images, and other binary files. And also we use Postgres as a primary data source to store metadata used for indexing. So as you can see, it's already has a lot of dependencies. And when we started, we used an Azure. So during the development environment, you just connect to staging environment and use it as a backing service and develop with it. The problem with this scenario is it's kind of scary to change schema, database schema, to move stuff around, to drop things, because it's integration environment. You can disrupt it, you can make it unavailable for other developers, for example, and there are a lot of challenges for testing the solution end-to-end. This is why we were motivated to use Aspire. Also, we didn't have a Docker Compose for local development, so it was no-brainer to introduce the latest and greatest piece of technology. And I'm happy that I had an opportunity to try it. So, lesson number one. Adding Aspire is quite straightforward and incremental. What I mean by that? Basically, we have this kind of infrastructure, right? We have Elastic, we have Azure Blob Storage, and so on. But we didn't really move all of these components in one go. We can just focus on the most important ones and move gradually. You can mix and shift the services, right? And do it like when you need it. Of course, it's nice to have everything packaged in Aspire way, but you don't need to do it. And it enables you to try it and see how it goes, and experiment with it. The second highlight from this approach and from this lesson is that we don't really need to adopt all abstractions from Aspire. For example, I mentioned to you service defaults as a feature of Aspire. We didn't use it because we already have an existing solution. It would be not really suitable for us to include the service defaults and so on. So we just don't use it, and it's fine. We find an alternative way to do it. I will show you in the next slide how to minimize the changes to work with Aspire. It's something that I called hosting integration adapter method, and the idea is pretty simple. And another point that to support our architecture or migration flows and so on, we use the C# to define the fine-tailored flow, how we apply migrations, how we manage our solution, and with Docker Compose it was not possible. You need to do it manually. But with Aspire, we can onboard new developer, just hit F5, and he will have like full setup, including scaffolded databases, and you can just start developing. I think it's a great experience. So Aspire opens up a lot of opportunities. And here's the point number 3, Aspire adapter code. So for example, here we are adding Elastic resource to our solution. And basically there is a built-in way to provide the connection to a resource, which is connection string. But in our case, in our solution, we used the decomposed connection string, which is URL, login, and password, environment variables or configurations. This is why we added overload of method with reference. So it's possible to configure the component in multiple ways. It means that these values, when you're using development scenario on your local machine, provided automatically, right? You don't need to do anything to make it work. And you don't need to change your production configuration, your key vault, your app configuration, etc. Basically, you just change the code on the app host side. And this is very convenient, because otherwise you need to refactor and move stuff around, which can be tricky and dangerous, and you don't have time, etc. So this is nice. I highly recommend this approach, and I've seen it used by other community members, like in open source. When I looked at source code of GitHub, people are adopting this kind of way of managing. Okay, let's move forward. I hope I have enough time, so please let me know if I'm off the schedule. Lesson number 2. It's be ready to write custom integrations. In our case, we need to write an Elastic component because it was simply not available. We didn't have Aspire 8.0, so we implemented our own. And as you can see, it's pretty straightforward. It's a hosting integration. We are adding resource, and we are defining stuff like image, registry, endpoint, environment variables. Pretty much you can find all of it in Docker Compose, right? So basically it's a translation of Docker Compose to C# code. And actually, I just listened to David Fowler. He uses a ChatGPT to translate Docker Compose to Aspire integration components, and it works for him. So maybe it will work for you. But most of the time, custom resources are provided by community. But my lesson is that don't worry if you need something that's not supported by community, or don't be scared to copy code from community and adjust it how you like it for your specific needs. It's basically, straightforward, and there is no magic. It's a very simple model that does it. The next lesson 3, that you require the workload to be installed, and it can be tedious in case of CI/CD pipeline because it takes 1 or 2 minutes, depending on machine, right, to install it, and it slows down your CI/CD. So what we've done initially, we created a separate solution without app host and related dependencies, and it allows us to move faster. But I have a good news for you. In Aspire 9, there no longer dependency on Aspire workload. It means that we can remove installation of workloads from CI/CD. We don't need to install it and wait for it, and the model drastically simplified. So be ready to upgrade to Aspire.NET 9 because it will be supported in .NET 8 because they support LTS version. The next one is a huge one, managing start dependencies. In real world scenario, you probably have seen it. You need like perform a migration, then you need to start your service, or you need to do some tasks prior to starting a background worker, and so on. In this case, there is some sort of application dependency graph when you need to wait for service to be available. And there is a mechanism in Docker Compose that allows you to accomplish it, but it's really hard to write bash code and everything to really check if the database is ready to receive incoming requests. So basically, let me just show you how it looks on practice, and then we go back to the solution, right? So assume we have a DB server. It has health check. Now we are waiting in migrator for DB. You see, wait for DB, and only after migrator has completed, right? We can start an API. Wait for completion of migrator. So this is dependency graph. Also, we have a pgadmin tool that waits for DB. It's very descriptive, and really you can see the structure of the application. And in Aspire 8, it was not possible to do it out of the box. So basically, I created such package, which called Aspire Hosting Depends On, and this is the code that uses this package. But it's a built-in functionality in Aspire 9. And it's really great because it's one of the requested features for Aspire 9, and it really simplifies the describing of application graph, right? You don't need to use this package, although you might want to give it a star anyway, if you want to. Okay, lesson number 5. Aspire project can take some time to boot up. So in our case, it was Elastic. Elastic takes like 1 or 2 minutes to completely finish the start of the Elastic. And it's really tedious because if you take a look at how you develop with Aspire, you just run up host constantly. You start it, you stop it, you make a change. When you make a small change, you need to reload the whole system, which can be really bad because you have this little thing just to try, right? When you're debugging something, it's horrible. So what we have done, we implemented a mechanism to run Aspire infrastructure separately. It means that, for example, we can start Elastic and perform migration and start maybe web API in Aspire, setup, and run the worker separately from Aspire. And, to be able to restart it and don't touch Aspire. This approach has some drawbacks. I will not delve into details, but it's not perfect. But there is also, so there is 2 points of this problem. First point is that we need to start some infrastructure components that takes time. The second point is that we need to restart some service multiple times for development scenario when you make a delta change, right? And you need to try it out. And another good news, we have this tackled down, approached in Aspire 9. First of all, now you can pin persistent containers. Basically, with one setting, your Elastic instance will not restart. And you can restart Aspire as many times as you want. It reuses the same container. And the second one, there is an action to restart a specific service from the Aspire dashboard. And the interesting thing is that it even attaches, debugger and do a rebuild for you. So basically, you just need to make a change and see if it was hot reloaded or not, and try to restart it. And the lesson number 6, it's kind of related to lesson number 5. It's really not easy to run things without Aspire, because if you see how it looks like from developer perspective, there is a lot of magic, right? You really don't know how, for example, your Postgres client integration is configured, how service discovery works, and so on. So it can be really tedious to reverse engineer Aspire or to replicate the approach. And in our case, we implemented special way of registering projects. Basically, what we do, we check if project is excluded from partial setup. And if it's not excluded, we just run it as a project. And if excluded, we use event dumper. And basically, env dumper emulates the Aspire environment variables and collects them and puts them in one file. It means that we can just run things without Aspire by just changing the environment file, the generated file, or playing with it. It gives us the flexibility. And yeah, it's something that we need, and I think it's beneficial. And there is no solution for this problem, to run things without Aspire. Basically, you have one big solution that you need to run as app host. This can be problematic for big systems, actually, and it's not solved. Also, kind of related to the previous one, no way to run a partial setup. Basically, as you've seen here, we implemented it by using register project method, by excluding the project from setup. This way we can, simplify our startup configuration and exclude services. And in some cases, it's good because, for example, assume we have a front end written in Blazor, and we really don't want to restart our application every time we make a change. In .NET, I mean, like in Aspire prior to 9.0, right? So basically, we run partial setup of our whole system and exclude a web application and run web application in hot reload mode. And this allows us the productivity flow when you don't need to start the app host, and you have really this great experience of running hot reloaded Blazor app. But unfortunately, there is no way to run a partial setup. As I say, everything is bundled together, and it's hard to swap and run a partial configuration. So consider this in mind. The other one, this short lesson, is like I'm using Podman, and half of tools, for example, Kibana or pgadmin, doesn't work on my machine because of networking, how it's networking done for Podman. This is going to change in Aspire 9, but sorry, I'm not sure. This is like not settled down. I haven't tried it, right, on preview version. Right now, I just don't have these tools available for me, and it's tedious. I would like to have a Kibana on my local developer machine next to Elastic. Okay, but it's not possible right now. The other one is the client integration depends on iHost application builder. You probably know this interface. This is a pretty standard one. I don't know, introduced in .NET 6 maybe. And as you can see, you needed to register the configuration, health checks, and so on. And basically, you need a DI, configuration, and so on. But I think it's a very bad approach because it violates the Postel's law, which is like accept the minimum amount required and return the most conservative amount, right? I mean, like type. Maybe it's not the best explanation, but I'm sorry. To be frank, in our system, we have a like CLI, worker, and we have a lot of code written that doesn't accept iHost application builder as dependency. It means that we had to refactor every code that works with configuration and DI to accept iHost application builder, because there is no way to add it to integration tests or use it separately in CLI if you don't have this dependency. For me, I would personally prefer iService collection and iConfiguration instead, because it's in many times it's in many scenarios it's an equivalent. But they decided to take a dependency on application builder. For me, it's a bad example of bad decision from .NET Aspire team. But let me know what you think. And the final lesson is learn by an example. How can you move fast in this environment where there are not many documentation and so on? Basically, my suggestion is to take a look of these reference applications. Each of them focuses on particular aspects of Aspire. I mean, like Aspire, for example, eShop support focuses on AI integration and how can we provision, for example, AI resources using Aspire even, the Azure CDK. eShop is an example of typical microservices solution. eShop on Azure is an example of this e-commerce site using Azure. The Shadow Shop is some interesting project that highlights how to use a workflow engine and Stripe processing, lots of dependencies and a lot of interesting stuff that resembles real-world application. So you always want to look something practical and challenging. And there is also another just good example of how to organize stuff. It's practical.NET Aspire. Okay, that is it. This is my 10 lessons learned from Aspire. I hope I explained them so you can understand, but nonetheless, please feel free to reach out to me if you have any additional questions. Let's proceed to Mentimeter and see how my talk impacted you and your like opinion about Aspire. So the question is, do you want to use Aspire in production?
Okay, interesting. So some people voted for no, but in most cases, seems like people are ready to consider this tool for a future use case. That's cool. So it seems like you were able to convince at least some.
Yeah, and I think the crucial part is the release of Aspire.9.
Yeah.
I mean, like 9.0, because a lot of as you can see, a lot of issues are solved. Before that, it was a headache. You're developing, you're feeling productive, and then you need to implement something, and you're stuck, and you need to improve Aspire somehow and prepare this kind of workaround.
That would be a really hard situation to put such portion of work on your in your backlog, because for business folks, like they just will not be able to understand what you wanna to do. Why do you need to do this at all?
Yeah. We removed our Docker Compose setup that was working for 3 years, and now we are using Aspire.
While people are voting, Alexei, did you have a chance to? Well, you probably did have a chance to drill down into the source code. What do you think about the culture of this project? I mean, how would you assess the quality of the project?
You mean like Aspire?
Yeah.
Source code? Yeah, so from Aspire, definitely, as I said, that you need to learn by example, and the good example is actual Aspire repo. And pretty much it's written in the, based on the guidelines from Microsoft, and it's pretty understandable code and so on. So there is no rocket science. You just can take a look at the code. But interesting approach that David Fowler uses and motivate and how to call it, popularize is that there should be all components of system should be built on public primitives. So, for example, if we are talking about the dependency graph, lesson number 4, right? They basically built eventing system to subscribe for resources before start, after start, to subscribe for when system is up, and they built the dependency graph on top of the public primitive. But in .NET 9, you will be able to build your own tools based on same primitive. So it's it's building a public. You can use source code and build your own tools, which is like it's like AskNet Core is built, frankly, because it's same architect, David Fallner.
All right. So, do you have any other information, other slides? Because we have a number of questions.
Yeah, it's awesome. But I also would like to know the opinion about which is like most useful lesson or most interesting, because
Which lessons did you learn, right? So
yeah. What lesson do you find the most useful, or do you or you're looking forward to try? You have 3 points, by the way, not just one. And maybe guys, I completely understand that it might be hard to keep the pace and my points, because I'm on tight schedule. It's not always easy to explain the whole background, of the project. And while we taking a look at the results, please feel free to unmute and ask questions, like online, or how we call it. I think it would be better to have an interaction or make it practical.
okay. So interesting comment from Richard. He posted a workaround months ago, but it should still work. He explained in one of the discussions on the GitHub how to plug in Podman and use it without instead of Docker.
It's nice. It can solve the problem on my machine. I hope it will not require me to buy a new Windows machine.
What I usually do when I need a Docker, I just set up a Windows subsystem for Linux and then forward the port, then forward the API from the WSL to Windows, and it becomes available on Windows. And on Windows, you can actually install a Docker CLI. It's free. It's not there are no restrictions because it's just CLI, and you can actually call your Docker API through the CLI from your Windows machine. And I think everything that interacts with Docker usually interacts with Docker through this API, through this exposed daemon. And if you do this, if you forward these ports of this daemon, then you will be able to use fully functioning Docker on your Windows. That's cool, but it will work only until WSL2 is running, and in order to do that, you need to at least open a shell in your terminal. So
but it's easy. I'm not smart like you, so I failed during the Docker installation.
Probably smarter
for my WSL.
Okay, right. Yeah. So there are some questions. Okay, so workaround from Richard was like quite similar. He was able to convince using Docker CLI to convince Docker CLI to use a Podman daemon instead of Docker daemon. So
yeah, interesting. I use Podman through WSL, but it doesn't work.
Interesting. Okay, ready to the questions?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm happy we are on schedule,
Yeah, me too. Okay, so the first one is from Attila. He is interested in how would Microsoft position this tool against such tools like AWS CDK, Terraform, and other from the perspective of provisioning the infrastructure as a deployment tool, the question is about. So is it like the best choice for deploying your applications, or it's just one of the features, and probably that's not the best used case. What's your experience?
From my experience, definitely I tried the AZD app. I was working on some blog post related to the CAP theorem, and I used Azure Service Bus and Azure SQL Server. And it was really nice. For demo, for blog post, I just used app host and I have this infrastructure ready in 5 minutes. I mean, like I need to work on the application for several hours, but when I finish, it was nice. But what we encounter in our system, usually we need to tweak a lot of parameters. And we already use Terraform in our case. So I don't think it's very good idea to use Aspire because there are many things that you cannot change and you will suffer a lot. So basically,
So
maybe
you
you
will
can
not
use it
for very simple like scenarios that might work, but for something like more complex, that's
yeah.
probably not the best choice.
Yeah, and I think if you already have a Terraform, just use it. If you don't have one, do something about it. Use it or like Bicep or something. Yeah.
Okay. Another question comment from Almas. First of all, he stated that for he has AWS on the project, and for AWS, Aspire doesn't have such a good integration as for Azure. And another his question, so that was more like kind of comment. Another question is like, what are the use cases except of local development? I think you mentioned something, but let's just one more time name them.
Yeah, for me, it's mainly local development experience and rapid onboarding. And when you have this so-called F5 setup, you just open the project and press F5, and it just works.
Yeah, because instead of like spending hours on configuring all the environment, you will be able, let's say you have a newcomer and you can just ask him, just clone the repository and run. One click run.
Yeah.
That's all.
Usually it
All right.
doesn't run.
So how about integration tests? I think right now Microsoft invests in that area as well. So potentially you can use Aspire to set up your infrastructure, you set up your services, and then run end-to-end scenarios or integration testing scenarios. Did you consider such use case of Aspire?
Yeah, I definitely taking a look at the integration tests, but as I understand, it's very like premature to use it right now, and it's like you can test like very subset of your features with Aspire right now because it's hard to configure it to adjust the app host, and it will not be useful. Maybe it's good to run, I don't know, some tests in Aspire just to take a look of how you making outbound HTTP calls because it's different from Microsoft testnet core testing server that does in-memory calls. It will do actual HTTP calls. Maybe you can cover some bugs, but I don't see how it can be useful to really run it in development workflow and make it fast tests.
Okay.
But maybe in future, it's evolving.
Right. So there is still some misunderstanding between the way how Aspire is positioned and is it an alternative to Kubernetes? Well, I think you probably explained that, but just one more time, maybe. .NET Aspire versus Kubernetes.
Yeah, so initially, community was frustrated about Aspire and the use case for Aspire, and there is different responsibilities of Aspire. Definitely, it intersects with Kubernetes, but I think it's different in this way that it provides you a building blocks and opinionated way to build microservices and distributed systems, and to be productive about it, and maybe share some knowledge, not in case of Helm charts, but in case of NuGet package. And it's good for .NET developers because we can be productive. We don't leave your IDE and so on. So I think it's more of a developer productivity tool rather than orchestrator. It just solves the same problem.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we should consider it as mostly as a productivity tool, not as a like deployment tool or orchestrator or some. Okay, that's clear. Okay. What else? that's interesting, quite interesting comment about the wait for dependency feature, because potentially during the application lifetime, it could be the situation when there is a network disruption or something, and the application, ideally, you should build your application so it should be ready for such cases. It should be resilient.
Yeah.
So that's like more a comment.
Yeah, it's a comment. You know, also I want to add, Aspire team adds health checks to the Aspire dashboard. It means that you know, there is a package to manage health checks in .NET that you know, knows how to do health check for Elastic, how to call specific path and expect specific status code. So they integrated it natively in Aspire component, and now you can see health of your dependency right from Aspire. So it can be, you know, useful when you cannot reach out a container or something.
Yeah. Right. So there was another interesting comment about the contribution to .NET Aspire, because it's a actively developed tool supported by Microsoft, and it's a good opportunity to contribute, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah. I think.
Did you try to? Well, I think you pushed some packages, right? So the way how this .NET Aspire project is structured, I think everyone can just build his own integration and publish to Nugget, and it is like becoming automatically available for the community and becoming a part of .NET Aspire ecosystem. Of course, if this component that you published has appropriate quality, if it's not very buggy.
You know, I also would like to add that there are issues that mark as good for first issue, and people from Microsoft actively help you to understand the requirements and to make your first change. So Microsoft, I think, very friendly about open source contributions, and maybe there is some KPI from managers for involving people in open source project. It's my suspicion. And another point, it's also there is also a repository called Community Toolkit Aspire or something like that. It's like if something doesn't fit directly in the Aspire repo, you can add a community contribution. For example, you have a component idea and something like that. Usually it's a component that you need to write, not like contribute to the, you know, I mean like internals. I think they will be more conservative about accepting these kind of contributions.
So the easiest way is just to contribute to your own components, not directly to the to the main repository, which is a bit more complicated. Okay. Sorry. And yeah, I think that's it. We've covered main questions from the community. Let's see if we have something else. So you've already posted the link to your blog.
Yeah, it says blog post about these 10 lessons. It was a prerequisite for this talk. So if you want to fresh your memory or just to read it when you have time, please feel free. Also, take a look at my other blog posts. I think I write about many other interesting subjects.
That's very true. A lot of amazing articles. Okay, so for now, I guess then we can wrap up the call. Thanks everyone for attending. Hope you learned something new. And maybe Alexey was able to convince you to use .NET Aspire, at least to try it out. So then, wish you all good luck and have a great rest of your day and a lovely weekend. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Have a good day. Bye-bye.